If you're not able to take responsibility for where your life is, then you really can't grow. You're constantly putting the blame on something else or somebody else. And how are you supposed to get forward if you're not even taking accountability from what you put into this? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the From Boys to Men show, brought to you by the Squire Program. I'm your host, Lheyton Cook. And today we're going to talk about, actually, before we even get into the topic, let me say this first. I want to remind you guys of the next upcoming Squire class coming up in January, January 13th to be exact. It's going to be at our ranch in Temecula. It's going to be a lot of fun. Full obstacle course, like full military style obstacle course, a shoot house, all kinds of super cool things. And so it's going to be a great time. It's going to be our second class at the ranch. And so you guys will be one of the first people there to enjoy a class over there. So make sure if you're going to Squire, try and go to the California one coming up January 13th, 2024. It's going to be a great time, so look forward to that. So now back to the topic, talking about emotional maturity. And a quick stat for you guys is a study actually conducted in the UK showed that men actually don't fully mature emotionally until age 43, as opposed to women that kind of develop more maturely faster at age 32, so 11 years earlier. And I was starting to think about that, and you hear little things like women mature faster than men do, and you start to kind of think about maybe some instances of you growing up with different girlfriends or whoever, right, females that you're around, where maybe they kind of felt like they had things figured out a little bit easier or quicker than you did, and this study speaks to that. Now, I'll give you an example of a time where I myself wasn't the most emotionally mature. I'd like to think that I've grown a lot since then. But there was a time in 8th grade, I was in middle school. Mind you, I had just begged my mom to go back to school because I had begged her. I was homeschooled at first. I had begged her to go to middle school. I wanted to go to public school with my friends. I wanted to be around everybody and have the social aspect. And she goes, okay, cool. She's like, but if your grades are bad, I'm pulling you out. I have no hesitation. Don't play with me. I said, all right, I got it. And so she let me go back to school. I was excited. Just be a normal kid, get on the bus, the whole thing, right? The whole experience. I was just really excited to be around all my friends, around my peers, right? And I remember this one kid named Jacob. He's a white kid, and it'll make sense why that matters in the story as I continue. I had heard he was saying some racist things about me around the quads or whatever, right? I myself wasn't actually there, but I'd heard, kids want to start drama. And so the message got back to me that he was saying this and that, whatever, right? So it got back to me. I confronted him. I said, all right, cool. Well, I'm not about to get suspended off of fighting you. So, or at least on campus anyway. So I'll see you after school. It was one of those things. I'll see you after class, right? And so I don't know how it ended up being a couple of days later. It wasn't actually after school on the same day. It was like, for example, I think it was a Tuesday where I confronted him. We had that kind of that face off at school during lunch. I think it was a Tuesday. And then on Friday was when we were actually going to fight. So I had a couple of days to go before we actually fought. It was one of those like Friday after school type things. And so anyways, as Friday was approaching, I was training. I literally was treating this like it was like Mayweather versus Pacquiao. I was training. I was in my room, shadow boxing, just practicing different combos. I'm gonna do this to him, and then I'm gonna do this and that and whatever. And then I heard during lunch one of the next days, I think it was a Thursday, that he had a knife he was gonna use on me and whatever else. And so that made it even more intense for me, even more serious. And so I said, okay, I'm not gonna let him even get close to using anything like that on me. I'm gonna have to put him out even sooner. So long story short, we get to Friday. The whole day, I'm just thinking about it. The whole day. Like each period, I'm really not even there mentally. I'm just thinking about this fight, right? So after school, the bell rings, and then everyone runs out. Everyone had already, the hype had built up throughout the last couple of days. So everybody's like running to this one area outside of the school grounds called the creek. And the creek was basically like a behind some houses. It was like literally a creek, like a little water creek, a little river type creek. And it had like trees covering the area a little bit and bushes and stuff. So you couldn't really see what was going on in there. And a lot of kids would go to smoke and fight and whatever, because you couldn't really be seen. So we were going to fight at the creek. So we walk around the corner, and it was like it was like my first, like, it was like my UFC debut. I walked around the corner. There's all these kids cheering, screaming, like, oh, he showed up. It's going down, whatever, right? So now my adrenaline's going. And as much as I want to put my hands on this dude, I'm equally as nervous and scared. What if he does get me or whatever, right? So we meet up, we fight. The fight ends up being a landslide victory for me. I didn't get hit one time, which is why I got in so much trouble after the fact. But everything that I imagined doing and how it was going to play out, it actually did play out exactly how I thought it was going to, which we would think I'd be excited about, which partly I was proud of myself that I was, I did well. But at the same time, I paid for that. I paid for, hurting him in that way. And it was an example for me that your emotional maturity will put you in situations, man, where you don't want to always be in. Like, that lesson could have been learned in so many different ways instead of having to actually fight someone, hurting someone, having the ambulance have to come pick him up. Had a broken nose. He was knocked out cold. And that was scary because when I was 14 and seeing him laying on his back with his eyes wide open, just staring at the sky, like with this blank look on his face, I thought he was dead. And so that was super, super, like, I literally went from like the big bad wolf of just putting this dude on the ground to shrinking back into my 14-year-old body and being like, dude, I just killed this kid. Like, this is crazy. So it got really real, right? But your emotional maturity will do that to you in the moment. You're not really thinking. You're just kind of like, I'm going to deal with it like this, and that's it. You're not really thinking long term. You're very short-sighted, and that's part of this as well. And so anyways, all that to say that from that day on, I had to make a conscious effort to not be that way, not be so responsive or reactive, I should say, to somebody saying something stupid or a comment that might have been said or might not have been said, or rumors or anything, man. Even arguments, when you get into arguments with your buddies or someone on the team or whatever, you just got to learn how to handle things a little bit differently. And so there's an example of when I wasn't so emotionally mature, I should say. But let me give you a couple other signs of maybe some things that you can look out for. You might be thinking, okay, well, do I have that issue? Do I have what it takes or the tools to be able to deal with certain situations if I encountered them? Here are a couple signs of not being emotionally mature. And number one for me is always playing practical jokes. Like, if you're the guy, always playing practical jokes the whole time, a couple of times is all right. People like having fun and whatever, joking around. But if you're the guy at work all the time, waiting around, behind closed doors, waiting to jump out and scare somebody, it's like, come on, Frank, let's get back to work, bruh. Like, we ain't got time for these games all the time. So that's number one. Number two is someone who avoids uncomfortable conversations. I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, at least at some point in their life, where they're not used to having uncomfortable conversations, or maybe some kind of trauma from when they're younger led them to avoid that by all means, or maybe they had an uncomfortable conversation when they were younger and they ended up getting beat up for it, or whatever it is. Like, there's different reasons of why people struggle with that, but I think that at some point you definitely need to address that and learn how to articulate yourself and communicate with that person without having any negative, consequences. And that's a really important tool that I think a lot of people don't have. Actually, they're not equipped with that. So learn how to have those uncomfortable conversations and have a productive outcome, which would literally just be, understanding each other after that conversation. Number three, another sign of someone who's not emotionally mature is someone that's not really focused on the future, that's constantly just thinking about, today. Right. And they're not thinking about tomorrow. This is exactly what I meant when I said about being short-sighted. Like, that's an issue. I get it. There's a time to have like the live in the moment, type of attitude. But for the most part, you need to learn how to plan for the future and prepare yourself for different things that are coming, or things that might happen, right? You need to learn how to prepare yourself and deal with those as well. And if you're only focused on today and not the future, then you're cheating yourself out of a richer future, right, for yourself and for your family. Number four, the fourth sign that you're not emotionally mature is you have trouble taking responsibility for yourself and your actions, man. Like, that's major. I tell my friends all the time, and it's crazy that I have so many examples of my buddies. Like, I love my buddies, man, but some of them are knuckleheads, man, and they have a lot of trouble taking responsibility for themselves. And I always look at it as, if you're not able to take responsibility for where your life is, then you really can't grow, right? Because you're constantly putting the blame on something else or somebody else. And how are you supposed to get forward if you're not even taking accountability from what you put into this, right? And so that's a hard thing for a lot of people, but something that you need to learn how to do. and something that you need to actually enjoy doing, because when you can learn how to take accountability and say that, okay, you know what, that was my bad. I put myself in this situation. You kind of get your freedom back, because you kind of take it back and you say, I own that. And I own that L. It's okay, but now I can make it better. And so there's that. Number 5, you'll often have trouble keeping a job. This is another big one too. I have a buddy actually that I'm literally thinking about in my mind as I think about this point, and he can't seem to keep a job. He can get a job. He articulates himself really well in the interview. He always somehow comes out on top. Obviously has a strong resume because he's worked so many different places. But where I see an issue with that is, if you can't, it's not about getting a job, it's can you keep a job? You know, it's not about getting accomplishing the thing. Can you keep the thing? And it shows that you're emotionally immature if you can't keep the job, because it's not about just accomplishing it. It's okay, are you consistent? Are you disciplined enough? Are you focused enough to continue to do it and ride it out for the long haul? And so that's another really big thing too. And so I want you to ask yourself, as I'm kind of naming off of those few things, do you have those things, or have you done those things in the past? And so those are really big ones. Now, let's talk about signs that a man is emotionally mature, because it's not all bad. There's obviously the opposite side as well. There's things you can do to make yourself a little bit more emotionally mature. And so number 1 for me is a man that demonstrates humility, right? He doesn't need to brag all the time. I think about me being a boxing fan. I think about the different fighters when you see them out either the weigh-in or the face-off, or just different press conferences leading up to the fight. You'll see, in some cases, you'll see the super, just rambunctious, just like loudmouth, cocky fighter. And I'm not gonna lie, most of the fighters that I like are that kind of style guy, like the Floyd Mayweathers, the Conor McGregors, the Muhammad Ali's, the Roy Jones Jr.'s. Like, I love that type of person, but you got to be able to back it up, my dude. And McGregor, not so much nowadays, but I'm still a fan of him regardless. But that's a big thing, right? Is you'll see that kind of guy going up against somebody who's super humble. They're kind of just like, whatever, it's just a fight, it's just work. I don't have anything to prove. As far as right now, in the moment, I don't need to yell or be loud or brash or whatever the case is. And you see the other guy trying so hard to get in his head. And then you'll see at the fight, like, they'll do these clips where it's the press conference, and the humble guy is trying to shake the cocky guy's hand, and the cocky guy doesn't want to shake his hand. He's like, just kind of, spits in his face. And then the humble guy's kind of like, all right, cool. And then it goes to the next clip of the cocky dude getting his ass whooped, man. It's crazy. Like, it proves itself over and over again that sometimes the loudest person in the room is actually the weakest person. And so you don't want to be that kind of guy, man. Always having to be flashy and cocky and in people's face. Obviously, you want to be confident, carry yourself as such, but you don't want to be too much where you're basically just setting yourself up for karma to just come back and whoop your ass, man. So that's number 1 for me. Number 2, the second sign that a man is emotionally mature is someone that focuses on his growth. Someone who focuses on his growth and is always talking about building something. Like, you're looking, again, back to the long term, not short-sighted, just thinking about, okay, well, yeah, I did well yesterday. It's about talking about, okay, how can I do better today, and how can I do better, even better tomorrow? That's another really big one. I think people overlook it because they're just where life can be uncertain sometimes, and so they don't really want to think too far ahead. They just want to focus on today. But again, getting a better practice of thinking a little bit further ahead as well. Number 3, a man that exhibits self-discipline, one that doesn't let himself slack out because of his selfish desires. And this can be a number of things. Like, there's so many different vices and addictions and roadblocks that people run into because they're not disciplined. Like, they can't exercise discipline. They try, they just fail. They fail. That's just life. That's how it goes. But at some point, man, you got to learn how to not be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you're not always going to be motivated to do the things that you need to do. Sometimes it's just going to take discipline, man. Like, just putting your head down, doing it anyways. Like, there's a lot of times that I have to get up in the morning and go to the gym, and I do not feel like going. Even sometimes on my favorite days, like chest day is my favorite day, or arms, right? For a lot of guys, like, that's just like the beach muscles. That's what we love to work. But even sometimes on those days, man, I'm just not motivated. I don't want to get up, but you still got to get up and get the work done anyways, because otherwise you're going backwards. And so you got to practice being more disciplined in all areas of life. And then to number 4 is mature men set boundaries for themselves and for others around them. And so I'm trying to think of an example I can give you this. Like if you have a friend that's constantly late, that's constantly flaking on you, that's showing a lack of respect for your time, and therefore it's unacceptable. And so you have to set boundaries for not only yourself, but for those around you as well, like to let people know that, hey, you can't disrespect my time. I don't disrespect your time. And I definitely don't like when my time is disrespected. And so a mature man emotionally is going to be one that sets boundaries and is comfortable doing so. I think that's something that, is uncomfortable for some people, to set boundaries or speak up for themselves. And that's something that you need to work on if you struggle with it, to be the complete man that you can be. Lastly, number 5 is another sign of maturity is to show respect and consideration to people whose values, opinions, and beliefs differ from yours. Like religion, political beliefs, personal interests, things like that. And it's actually really easy to do. I mean, I trip out sometimes when I see people so emotionally invested in somebody's, in their religion or their ideologies or whatever, their personal interests, political beliefs. Like, who cares, bro? Just focus on yourself. Like, why are you arguing with somebody on IG in the comments about if you're a Republican or Democrat or whatever, black, white, mask, no mask? Like, none of it. Focus on yourself, bro. Focus on yourself, your family, and what you're building and what you're doing. That's a really big sign of emotional maturity. And obviously, on the opposite end of that, if you are not doing that and you're in the comments arguing with somebody, that shows how emotionally immature you are. And so don't be that guy. So anyways, guys, I hope you got value in this episode today. It was something that's super important to me, and actually was dealing with this with a friend of mine. We were having a conversation about this exact topic. And so that's where the inspiration came from this episode. So if it brought you any value, do me a huge favor. Like the video, help us get boosted up in the algorithm. We appreciate you guys, and I will see you next time. Take it easy.